I'm Allison, and thank you for joining me for Where I'm From 162. This has been with Marie. We've tried a few times, so I have said this a few times. What have you been reading? I have been reading, I should really know this by heart by now. Where Did You Sleep Last Night? A Personal History by Danzy Senna. I'm excited to read her new book, Color Television. And so I thought I'd read this, her only memoir. Hey, it worked. Now you just need to turn it around.
Okay. Can you see me?
I can. Can you see me?
No, because my phone is turned around and the screen is on the other side, so I can't see you, but that's okay.
I think you can do the thing where you boop, you like turn your screen around. Do you see on the thing there's
Oh,
like
here
a,
we
there
go.
you
Look at
go. Yeah.
that. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I did not know how this worked
It's
or
okay.
how I was supposed to join you, so I apologize.
It's really okay. This is 162.
Okay.
I've seen it all. It's just what it is. It's really okay. It was just funny because I like to start over after it gets a little long so everyone doesn't
Yeah.
have to watch us be
No,
like,
I
hey, is
mean,
it working? Is it working?
yeah, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. You don't want that. Your audience does not want that. Nobody wants that. It's totally cool. Like, I get it. Like, I'm so sorry about the mix up.
It's okay. Truly, it's totally okay. So, how are you? Are you a little now anxious? Are you
I'm,
okay? Because that was a lot of
I'm
things. Are you
good.
good? Okay,
I'm good.
good.
I'm cool. I'm just back from a trip, so I'm also jet lagged.
Wow.
So my brain is like, what? I don't even know. But so I don't have like the brain space for anxiety, so it's
That's
all
good.
good.
That's good. I like it when there's not brains. I mean, if you're in a good place and there's not brain space for it. It's not great when you're just overwhelmed and you have no more space. Where did you
Okay.
go? Someplace fun?
Yeah,
Interesting?
we went to
Oh,
Paris. My husband and I
oh,
went to Paris. It was our wedding anniversary, and we went to
oh.
Paris, so it was pretty great.
I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
I love Paris.
Yeah, I
I,
haven't
I
been there
haven't been in a
since I
long
was
time.
16, and
Yeah, I
it
haven't
was
been there in a long
amazing.
time. But it's like a place that, especially as a tourist, because we're not like hanging out in the suburbs where most of the change is happening.
Right.
It's like we're in the city. It doesn't change that much. I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I think like a lot of things like, the practicalities of like getting around museums and this and that and some of the things that you do when you're visiting, that's different from like pre-pandemic. And certainly when I went,
yes.
I was 16, I was on a leash, I was in high school. It was a completely different experience. So
Yeah.
this was totally fun and totally different.
Oh, lovely. Um, I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
I hope to go again
Thank you.
someday. It's on the list.
So, yeah.
Um, so anything else you want to share or say, or are you situated to read your poem? Do you have a place you can rest your phone?
I can't really rest my phone, but I can read my poem. It's all good.
Okay,
Okay. So, I'll just dive in again.
sure, if you're ready. It's up to
Yep.
you. Okay.
I'm from bookstores and notebooks, lay flat sewn bindings, easy to write in, from sharpened pencils and colorful fountain pens. I'm from the Beverly Salem Bridge, born on one side, grown up on the other, from the smell of fish and a happy meal every Friday. I'm from running through other people's gardens, from lilacs I stuffed my face in and still do, from who cares if I sneeze. I'm from Irish Catholic grandmothers, from red hair and freckles, from O'Connor's and Larkin and Cloutier. I'm from Wellesley's lawns and Dublin's lanes, from poetry and movies and wandering out alone. I'm from the suburbs and the world outside, from alternative rock and stapled up zines. I'm from fried clams and toes in the sand, from the music of the waves from their salty hands. I'm from the heirlooms that will go to someone else, and from the loving family I chose for myself. I'm from the secrets I've kept and the ones that I've told, from those who love me and those who've let me go. I'm from a heart still cut and raw with loss, and from a heart that loves no matter the cost. Thank you. Thank you for
Beautiful.
having me. Thank you for having me, by the way. If I didn't say that already, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining me. And
Of course.
what a beautiful poem. And I had imagined it was Cloutier, but I wasn't sure. So I'm always happy to hear things said, but that I'm guessing in my brain as I type your name out.
Yeah. Well, I'm not taking, you can, I usually just say Cloutier to keep it simple, but Cloutier is nice if you're speaking French. And certainly when I was in France, I always said Marie Cloutier.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a very French looking and sounding name, the
yeah.
whole thing. Um, so what was it like? So did you write this in Diane's workshop? Diane Zenna, who just joined me just a few weeks ago,
Yeah, I
I
did.
think 2 weeks ago.
I started it in her workshop. It was such a neat idea and so resonant. And I think having a format to follow is always fun.
Yeah.
And, she described it as sort of like a Mad Libs type
Yeah,
of exercise.
for sure.
And
Hmm.
I think it's just something that you can really make your own. I read through a lot of the other poets
Hmm.
that you've had on the show at their examples, and just how versatile a form it is
Yeah.
was really intriguing to me. And of course, I started, and then I just broke into rhyming couplets halfway
I know,
through
which I
because
love. I love hearing it because reading it, I mean, it's such a different thing reading it out loud than reading it to yourself.
yeah, absolutely is. And that's just how my brain likes to write poetry and rhyming couplets sometimes.
Yeah.
So just went with it. But it was such a rewarding exercise, and it's something that I want to keep working on, like
Yeah.
just do, because I think it's such a rich vein to mine. I took a class with Amy Seif Christian, who
Oh,
always would have us
oh
do,
my gosh.
y-
I know and I'm friends with her.
yeah,
She's like number 5. She's very, very
yeah.
early in the series.
I
Really
saw
early.
I saw her poem on there,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Yay, Amy!"
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
but she likes to have us do identity writing, and this is sort of like, it
Yeah.
feels like an extension of that, or another version of that,
Yeah.
which I really enjoyed that, because we do all carry so many identities within ourselves, and it's such a fluid and ever changing concept. Like, who am I? Where am I from? What am I made
Yeah.
of? And that can vary from day to day. I mean, I was thinking, I'm in Diane Sinna's group, which is a grief writing group, and I've been tackling like a grief issue or whatever, and that has, you could write a whole poem on that. What is my grief made of? What, like, it's such a, a versatile tool to dig into so many subjects.
I agree. I think personally, and then I know I've talked to people here about like even if you're writing fiction,
Yeah,
you could write about your characters and where they're from and what they remember, and it is so versatile,
absolutely.
and I think it is a way. Diane and I actually talked about this, like a way to talk about grief and the people we've lost. Um, like you're almost kind of looking at it
Yeah,
sideways because of the prompt. Like you're not staring it in the face, which oftentimes it's difficult. I think especially when grief is acute and early on.
sure.
I mean I couldn't write about it any of my grief for a long time because I just couldn't really open the door. It was
Yeah,
too overwhelming.
absolutely. I mean, I was, for this particular situation, I was in, probably, it was over a year before I could really start to write about it. But then I had to. Then it was like
Yeah.
the only thing I could do,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had to, and that's kind of the path I've been on ever since. So,
Yeah. And do you feel comfortable talking about who you lost, or is that something that's private?
yeah, sure. No, I'm writing a memoir about it,
Yeah.
so I should, you know.
Well, if you're ready. I mean, there's a difference between writing it and talking about it too.
No, I know that's for sure there is. So when I was in college, when I was 18 years old, I started in a relationship with a man who was almost 50 years older
Oh,
than
I
me.
read your essay in Dorothy Parker's Ashes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And
Okay.
so he passed away in 2022 at the beginning of the year, right around my
Mm-hmm.
birthday, actually, just coincidentally.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of spun me out on this. And I had
Mm-hmm.
never, I've known other people who died before, other
Mm-hmm.
family members and stuff, but this was like a whole new experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a kind of grief that I had never experienced and that I had never anticipated, and
Mm-hmm.
it just totally threw me. It totally overwhelmed me.
Mm-hmm.
And it sent me down this just spiral of this morass or something. I don't know. I've used a lot of different metaphors already. I'll use a lot more.
That
There's a
happens.
lot. But
Yeah.
a year or so into that, I just had to start writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what I was going to write. I had no idea what I was going to write. I had tried in the past to write fiction about this
Mm-hmm.
situation,
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really gotten anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just realized, I was like, no, I need to write my story. I need to write a memoir. Even if nobody wants to read it, who
Mm-hmm.
cares? But I need to write it.
Yeah.
And I started on that process, and ever since, and I've always been a poet. So you know, it sparked a lot of other creativity, not just writing about him or that relationship, but a lot of other things too, and a lot of creative nonfiction. So,
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that idea that because I certainly I'm sort of now getting to the point with my memoir, like actually my person is reading it and I'm going to start submitting it. Like I've written it and it's like done-ish, for this moment. And
congratulations.
thank you. It's surreal. It doesn't really like it's also so internal, right? Like you just
Right.
kind of know when you're reading something like, oh, okay, this is what you're going to be for right
Yeah.
now. Like I can't, I was talking about it with an artist friend yesterday. Like the piece of work actually starts to say goodbye to you. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're done with me for now. But it's where I'm from. I mean, it's about this very thing we're talking about, and for so long, people were like, "Oh, you should write about your childhood," da, 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 And I did similarly to you, like try to write fiction about it, because it was felt too like hot to the touch, like for me to write about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what I would say,
Yeah.
which I know is like something that for people's like, how do you not know what you're going to say? But I really just didn't know.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I was the same. Like I didn't, I couldn't even wrap my head around what would I do? Would anybody believe me? Is it too crazy a story?
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
if I wrote it as fiction, it would sound outlandish, but if I wrote it as nonfiction, and also like he was still alive for a long
Right.
time, right? So I didn't
Hmm.
want to, I felt like I didn't want to deal with it on any level.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be like in the past, right? I had a great husband, I have a great life,
Right. And why are you digging up the past? Because I think many of us have been confronted with that question here. Why are you still thinking about it? Why are you digging up the past? Why are you, just live the life that you have now? And
right.
sure, sounds
Right.
good.
And then and then
It's
death
not
and
working
then
out for me, but yes.
death just catches you out, right? And it brings
Hmm.
up all these unresolved issues and all these things that you haven't processed. And I just couldn't even believe the amount of pain I was in and how much I was hurting and all these things that I kept replaying over and over. And it took some time and some therapy, but
For sure.
I needed to write about it, and I just started by taking a notebook and just writing down what happened. Just this is what
Hmm.
happened, one thing after another.
Hmm.
And then it was like, well, how do I shape this
Yeah.
into something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
somebody else would read? Like, it's like different stages of the process, but it was it's been a learning experience, learning about myself and learning about the craft of writing and so forth, and
Mhm.
really rewarding. So
And I think too, I'm glad that it has been. I'm happy to hear that. I think it's true too when you sort of set out on this journey to write about something that feels meaningful to you, or at least for me, it was like, oh, I'm going to write about this even if it's just for me, which is similar to what you just said.
yeah,
And I think that was how I was able to keep
yeah,
going
yeah,
uh, because it was like, okay, in the end, this is for me, and I don't
right,
know where it will end up, and I don't know who's going to read it, and I don't, and that gave me some sense of safety.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure,
like, oh, I don't need to prove anything to anyone
right.
except
No,
me.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But then it's like,
Yeah.
I definitely had moments where I was like, you know what? I do want to publish this. I do want
Sure.
to publish this.
Yeah.
Like I started to get
Hmm.
a little ambitious for it,
Hmm.
and I started to take classes and I started to try to learn
Hmm.
more and write essays and write things and
Hmm.
try to get things published and have some little teeny trickles of modest success with that here and
Hmm.
there. And that just encourages you to keep going. I had a meeting with an editor early on in my process. I won like a free editorial consultation with an editor,
Hmm.
and she read 20. She's like, I'll read up to 20 pages. And I was like, okay, I better come up with 20 pages. So I came up with 20 pages, and she was so kind and so
Hmm.
supportive and had such nice things to say to me about my writing and about, yeah, you could market this could work, you could sell this. It was such a huge boost
Hmm.
right at a time when I really needed it. And that just
Yeah.
encouraged me to keep going. And, I just think when you have something that you really want to do, you just need to like do it, and you need to just tell yourself that it's possible
Yeah.
and find
Yeah.
people that are going to be on your side and encourage you and get you. That's such a so because none of us get there alone, right? We all
No.
need mentors and other people to
People we
get us.
trust.
Yeah,
Hmm. And
yeah,
I think that's such an important point too about like feedback and how it can boost you and encourage you and keep you going. And it's a good reminder when we're reading others' work to treat it, like the fragile thing that it is.
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
to treat it with care because even if we have constructive feedback, like to remember that this is somebody's like little baby,
Right.
and you gotta tell them what all the things that are great about it
Yeah.
before,
Right.
Not
Right.
just here's how you can make it better, which is important, but it's like, I think especially with memoir writing, because it feels, I mean, it is personal,
Yeah.
openly. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah. And when
uh,
you're dealing with nonfiction, you also want to be remember to be non-judgmental and talk
yeah,
about the writing
yeah,
and not about, the
the person.
situation or something like that, which can be challenging. Sometimes it's challenging for me because I'm like, but.
And I think too, the most compelling memoirs are complicated. The people are
Mhm.
complicated, and that's what keeps us reading. And so, yeah, it's important to be non-judgmental because otherwise people aren't going to want to share those parts of themselves,
Right.
you know. Um,
Sure.
so anything else that you want? And I'm excited to read your book, Marie. I loved your
Thanks.
essay. I
Me
thought it was
too.
really vulnerable. And for me, it was ultimately, it's interesting you talked about writing your story because ultimately I felt like it was about finding somebody to just listen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's such a big part of like the grief process, right? And I mean, I was actually I'm writing a chapter in my book right now that is kind of harking back to that concept a little bit where it's like, there's so many people who just wanted to tell me to don't be upset. He was this bad person. You should
Yeah.
be angry. You should be this, you should be that. And it's like, I know that.
Right.
I know that. I've been angry. I am angry.
Mm-hmm.
I need somebody to listen to me. I need somebody to just listen to me. I forget Megan, I forget her name. She wrote a book about grief and she's like, the most important thing the grieving person needs is just somebody to acknowledge your grief. Just see it,
Yeah.
you know. And my transformational moment was when I changed therapists and my therapist said to me, I understand why you're so upset. I
Oh.
understand why you're so upset. And
Mm.
it was just like, thank you.
Yeah.
I had just been
Yeah.
wanting to hear that from somebody, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
so
that's the moment with the therapist in general. Like, and if your therapist, anyone out there, if your therapist isn't saying that to you, get a new therapist.
yeah,
You
I
know,
did, and it worked.
because that for me, for sure, with my two long-term therapists I've had, I can remember that moment with both of them
Yeah,
and how to understand and also feel seen and believed for
right.
me was a big part of it because a lot of my
Yeah,
stuff was, really nitty gritty, like childhood, really early. And so
yeah,
I have my own problems, questions, and just to have somebody who's like, no, I see you. Like, this is real.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I can still cry, thinking about it. I mean, it was a huge step for me. Yeah.
yeah. And then because I've started asking people the name of the person they've lost, but I know that yours is complicated because he was someone of note. So are you going to use an alias or are you going to use his name?
I
Do you know?
mean, so far, I mean, so far in everything I've written so far, I use his real name. I use his real name in the Dorothy Parker's
Okay.
Ashes essay. Probably, I read Mary Carr's Art of Memoir, right? And she says, just use the real names when you're drafting, just because it's
Yes, which
so
is
hard
totally what I did
to
too.
write about somebody and like make them a
I
character
agree.
and connect with them at
Yeah.
that point, And then at the very end, she says, you just go do this big find replace in your draft,
I just did that. Yeah.
right?
I
Um,
just did that. And I made a key of all the names I changed
yep,
because I
yep. And
couldn't do it either,
yeah,
Marie.
yeah.
It
And
felt
not just him, but
fake
other people
for
in the book,
sure.
other characters,
Yeah.
characters, quote unquote, like my
Yep.
friends and
Yeah.
things like that, other people who are
Hmm.
involved. I'm definitely going to change all their
Yep.
names, for sure.
Yeah.
And as far as him, I mean, probably most
Yeah.
likely,
I mean,
there's
he's
no real
dead, so
reason
it's not
to,
as much of a deal, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's, it's like there's reasons to do it and reasons not to do it. I think probably I would do it, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. That's so funny. I read that book a while ago
Yeah.
and I hadn't thought that that was her advice, but I mean, I hadn't thought to think that it was her advice, but it was like in my mind, I tried early on to change their names and it felt wrong. Like felt like a barrier to getting to what I needed to get to.
Yeah, because now it's almost like you're writing fiction. It's more
Yeah.
it starts to feel like you're writing fiction when you change the names because it's not them anymore, it's somebody else.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It-
such a good reminder. Like, because you do things, but you don't remember why you did them to begin with. Just like, oh, this feels like the thing to do, so I'm going to do it, and then I'll figure it out later, which
Right.
is what you do.
Right.
because you
It's
just
that.
kind of try to remove all the barriers.
Right. Right. You just want to get to the heart of it as best you
Mhm.
can. And I think somebody's name is integral to their identity.
It's
And I
true.
can't write about a different guy like David or whatever, names that I thought about using.
Yeah,
Whatever, who cares,
yeah.
right? But it's like that's his name. That's who he was. I have avoided mentioning the college that he worked at and
That's
other
probably
specific
smart.
yeah, and other specific identifying details,
Yeah.
but that is his real first name. So
hmm I also, it's interesting too, thinking about this idea of like barriers and then thinking of the prompt, because I think sometimes people might see that as, but it's a container and there's a difference.
yeah, it's a container. And I think sometimes like I like as a poet, I like writing formal poetry. I like to have rules.
Hmm
I feel like it helps me to make choices that surprise me. And,
That's
and
what Annie Finch said.
yeah,
Something very similar.
yeah. And so having a container, having a
hmm
stricture or a template to work with, I actually find that liberating
I
in a
do
sense
too.
because it helps me make decisions,
Yeah.
and I often come up with some things that I wasn't expecting, and I love that, and that's what creativity is all about, right? Finding what comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I enjoy a container or something that's directing me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's fun because then you feel kind of like, oh, okay, this is holding me. I can just let loose, you
yeah.
know?
I feel like it allows you to play in a different way than if
hmm
there's just no rules. And if you're just like, you can do anything, it's hard to do anything. At least that's how I feel sometimes.
Yeah, the blank page
I
is
wrote,
very intimidating.
yeah, I wrote a sestina about Hello Kitty. I wanted to write a poem about Hello
Mm-hmm.
Kitty. And I had just been taking classes on formal poetry. And I was like, oh, the sestina, that's a cool form. Let's try that. And that was so much fun. And I came up with all kinds of things that I never would have come up with if I just written like a blank verse poem.
Yeah. Yeah. Annie said something really, because she also has a book about like formal forms of poetry. And she was saying that, yeah, how freeing it can be to just embrace the form.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, not worry about like, oh, this is something from school or,
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, or this is some assignment. Like, it's still your poem, so you can still do whatever you want. This just
Yeah.
gives you some framework, and you can always break the rules.
Yes.
You don't have to
Yes.
follow the
Yeah,
rules.
that's
But sometimes having
important.
rules to break is fun.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm glad that we made it work. We did it. We're here.
Yeah, I'm
I
so
was
sorry about the
no,
confusion at the beginning.
it's fine. It happens, truly.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
I just want to thank you for having me on your show and for the opportunity to speak with you and read my work and and for promoting this and encouraging other poets to try it out.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Truly, I love it. So, thank you for joining me, and thank you to everyone who joined us, and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.